So we are now in the second half of our lecture in our module number 2 entitled Demand and its Determinants. Okay, so to continue, the next topic that we will discuss is about the demand function and the demand curve. Okay, so the quantity consumers are willing to buy depends on a number of different factors. This is what we call variables. So in our previous discussion, you've learned the different factors that affects their willingness and ability to purchase. So the most important variables of the demand is, of course, the price, because as mentioned earlier, this is the first thing that consumers actually see, okay, when making decisions. And of course, this is one of the most important considerations that they include in their decision to buy. So in general, the economists believe that the price, or as the price of the good rises, so buyers will choose to buy less. And as the price falls, they will buy more. So this is actually the application of our law of supply and demand. So although the goods price is important in determining the willingness of the buyers in purchasing, there are also other variables that influence their decision. So this includes their income, their tastes and preferences, the prices of other goods such as substitutes or complements, and so on. So again, you are already familiar with these variables because in the previous discussions and illustration that we have, we already considered them, like their income and the prices of substitutes and complement goods. Okay, so the economists actually attempts to capture all of these influences in a relationship, and they call it as the demand function. So this demand function is represented by this equation number 1. Okay, so if you could see there in your module and in the screen or in the slide, so this is the equation that they use to capture all of these influences and their relationships. So a hypothetical example of a specific demand function could be the following linear equation. So for a small towns per household gasoline, for example, they have this consumption per week where P sub Y might be the average price of an automobile in $1,000. Okay, as presented in our equation number 2. Okay, so here, suppose that the price of the gasoline, or P sub X, is $3 per gallon. Per household income, or I, is $50,000, and the price of the average automobile, our P sub Y, is $20,000. Then this function would predict that the per household weekly demand for gasoline would be 10 gallons. So we followed the equation, okay, that we have in the previous slides. Okay, so that's how you will determine their weekly demand. Okay, so suppose, for example, that we want to concentrate on the relationship between the quantity demanded of the goods and its own price, or that is our P sub X, then you would hold constant the values of income and the price of good Y. So again, we have here for our third equation, okay, as presented. So in the fourth equation, this gives the per gallon price of the gasoline as a function of gasoline consumed per week. So this is referred to as the inverse demand function. So here we need to restrict the Q sub X in the equation to be less than or equal to 11.2, so the price is not negative. Okay, so again, this function was actually based on the equation that we have, okay, in the demand function, but this was just expanded because we considered other factors also that affects the consumer's demand. So for the explanation of these items, you have there in your module, okay, as a reference. So please refer to your modules. Okay, but for this discussion, we will not deal more on or deeply about the formula. Okay, so the purpose or the expectation is that for you to be familiarized with this function and or demand function and demand curve. But again, to understand better, okay, so please refer to your module for the explanation. Okay, so here we just presented an example. Okay, so again, the main point here is that this equation shows the relationship between the variables or the factors that affects the consumer's decision in purchasing a good or service. Okay, so this equation actually was formulated by the economists, in which this will try to explain and determine in quantitative form, okay, the relationship of those variables. So here we have the demand curve. So the values that we plotted in this Cartesian plane, okay, was taken from the data that we've determined in the previous solutions using the equations presented. Okay, so that's for our demand curve. For elasticity concepts, so we go now to the elasticity concepts. Okay, so here, when we say elasticity, this is the measure of the variable's sensitivity to change in another variable. So most commonly, this sensitivity is the change in price relative to the changes with other factors. So again, as mentioned earlier, from among all of the variables that we consider, the most that affects the consumer's decision in buying is, of course, the price. So that's why there are some or most of the products or services may be changing its price. So if that is the case, then the demand will also change on the part of the buyer. So that's how sensitive, or that's how easily their decisions or demand changes because or just because of the change in the price. So in business and economics, when we say elasticity, this refers to the degree to which individuals, consumers, or producers change their demand or the amount that they supply in response also to the price or the income changes. So here, we will be talking about the change. What will happen with the demand of the consumers, the producers, or the producers if the prices will change. So that's what we will discuss in this portion or topic on elasticity concepts. Okay, so we have here three main concepts or rule for demand elasticity. So here, if elasticity is greater than 1, then the demand for that good or service is affected by price. So meaning to say, this effect has uh, changed the demand drastically, or it can easily change the demand. Okay, or meaning to say, we can refer to this as highly elastic. Okay, again, if the elasticity is greater than 1, the demand for the good or service is affected by the price. Okay, so any changes of the price will change their demand. So for the second concept, we have if the elasticity is less than 1. So the demand is said to be insensitive to the price, or this is what we call inelastic. So meaning to say, with this type of goods or products, if the elasticity is equal to or less, to 1, then it doesn't change the demand of the consumers. So they are not affected with the change also of the price. Okay, for the third concept, if the elasticity now is equal to 0, then the demand is said to be perfectly elastic or inelastic. Again, if the elasticity is equal to 0, the demand is perfectly inelastic. So, meaning to say, the consumers do not give any consideration on the price change on the goods and services. Okay, so to understand better, okay, so we will have this example. So here, insulin. Okay, insulin is used for diabetic patients. So insulin is a product that is considered to be highly inelastic. So why is that so? Okay, for diabetics who need insulin, the demand is great, that the price increase will have a very little effect or no effect on the quantity that they demanded, because they have no choice but to buy or purchase that, because it's very important to maintain their normal blood sugar, or else if they will not purchase it, so basically their health will be at risk. So that is why, regardless of the change in its price, they would still have the same amount or level of demand. Okay, so here, if the price will decrease, it do not also affect the quantity that they demand, because those who needs it do not wait until the price gets low before they will make the purchase. It's every day that they need to take insulin, so they don't have to wait for the time in which this product will lower its price before they will purchase. So that is why this product is considered to be highly inelastic, because it's really a need for those diabetics who uh, are using insulin. Okay, so on the other side, what about if, by the way, insulin in this case is essential or considered to be essential goods. What about on the other side? Uh, for non-essential goods like toys, okay, they are actually highly elastic products. Why? Because consumers will only decide to make a purchase if their prices is low, or they will look for another substitute of that product which have a lower price. Okay, so for them to consider buying it. So if the price of the toys increase, of course, the quantity demanded will also decrease. So if the price will decrease, the quantity demanded will increase. Okay, so this is how we explain these three main elasticity concepts. Okay, but of course, in our next topic, we will further enhance your understanding about the types of elasticity. We are talking about elasticity of demand here. Okay, so types of elasticity. um, demand elasticity. Okay, so as mentioned, this is an economic measure of the sensitivity of the demand relative to the change of a variable or variables. So, the quantity demanded of a good or service will depend, of course, on a different or multiple factors, such as what we have mentioned earlier, which this includes the price of the goods, the income of the consumers, and their taste and preference, and so on. So, whenever there is a change in those variables that we have mentioned, it will cause a change also in the quantity demanded for the good or services. Okay, so that's what we will discuss. Okay, so first, we have what we call under the demand elasticity. We have like five, I guess, types of elasticities. So the first one is price elasticity of demand, or we acronym that as PED. When there is a relationship between the change in the quantity demanded and the price of the good or service, this is what we call price elasticity. So again, the factor that influence the change in the demand is the price. So as the name it suggests, price elasticity of demand. So to compute the price elasticity of demand, so we have here the following equation. So that is equal to a percentage change in quantity demanded, or that could also be the same as the original demand minus the new demand divided by the original demand. This is actually how to solve for the percentage change. All you have to do is to get the difference between the original and the new demand and then divide it with the original demand. Okay, so that's for the percentage change in quantity demanded as our numerator. So we will divide this with the percentage change in the price. Okay, so that's how you will determine or compute for price elasticity of demand. Okay, so in connection with our PED, so we have here coefficient, okay, of price elasticity. So here, basically, the economists measure the price elasticity of demand in terms of coefficients. So in response to the change in price, demand for a product can be elastic, perfectly elastic, inelastic, or perfectly inelastic based on the coefficient. So basically, when we say coefficient, this is the constant, or in other words, if we will apply it with your price elasticity of demand, this is the answer to our formula or equation. Okay, so again, depending on the result using the equation, we can tell, or we can say, if that elasticity is, or price elasticity is elastic, perfectly elastic, inelastic, or perfectly inelastic. So again, we will follow the first three concepts that we've mentioned earlier. Remember that if the this one, if elasticity is greater than 1, meaning the good or service is affected by the price, so that is considered to be elastic. Okay, so we will apply this rule also as well. Okay, in connection with our price elasticity of demand. Okay, so to continue, since price and demand move in opposite directions, so as we have explained earlier, the coefficient will have a negative value. However, in most cases, the economists do not use negative sign and focus only on the coefficient itself. So we will disregard the number sign. Okay, if especially if that is negative, we will focus on the coefficient itself. Okay? So here, if our price elasticity of demand is equal to 0, then it is said to be perfectly inelastic. Okay, so if you could still remember, this is the same as what we have mentioned in the first three main concepts of elasticity. Okay, so when the price of elasticity of demand or PED is 0, then the demand is perfectly inelastic. So that is, there is no change in the quantity demanded if the price will change. So the demand curve will remain vertical. So again, any changes, or meaning to say any changes on the price of these goods or services will not have an effect on the quantity demanded by the customer. So that's why it is considered to be perfectly inelastic. So the demand is completely unresponsive to the change in price. So again, the customers have no what do you call this? They do not consider price as one of the important factor in decisions to buy. Okay, what about if our price elasticity of demand is between 0 to 1? Okay, so here, that is considered to be inelastic. Okay, so inelastic because this is now more than 0, okay, but less than 1. So if the percentage change in the demand is less than the percentage of change in the price, then that is inelastic. So we have here an example to illustrate. So for example, the price of chocolate increased from 10 to 20 pesos. So in this case, since there is an increase in the price, so the demand will decrease. So if before the demand is 10 pieces, so now it will be 5 pieces. Okay, so using our formula, percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price, so our demand or the coefficient is 0.5. So again, that is between 0 and 1. So we will consider this demand as inelastic. Okay? So if you could notice, there is actually a change in demand or decrease. But this is considered to be lesser. Okay, it has a lesser effect. Okay, when it comes to the change in their demand. Okay. So next, what about if our price elasticity of demand is equal to 1? So here, if that is the case, then this is considered to be elastic or unit elastic. So here, when the percentage change in demand is the same as the percentage change in price, then the demand is said to be elastic. So we will use again examples to illustrate. So the price, for example, the price of candy drops from 10 pesos to 5 pesos. So here we will expect that the demand will increase. Okay, so from 10 pieces, they will now buy 15 pieces. So based on our formula, so it happened that the percentage change in the demand and the percentage change in price is the same. So the coefficient now is equal to 1. That is why in this case, we will consider demand as elastic. Okay? So next, what about if our price elasticity of demand is equal to 1? Okay, so what will happen? Okay, so here, if the percentage change in demand is more than the percentage change in price, then it is said to be perfectly elastic. So we will use this example to illustrate. Okay, so the price of candy increased by 10%. So the demand also decreased by 20%. So here, our coefficient is equal to 2, which is now greater than 1. So because of that, we will consider this as, okay, the demand being perfectly elastic. Okay, so meaning the price is indeed, okay, the main consideration of the consumers in deciding if they will buy, okay, that product or not. Okay, so that's why again this is considered to be perfectly elastic. Okay, so those are for the first type of elasticity, price elasticity of demand. So we go now to the second type of elasticity. So this is income elasticity of demand, or that is YED. So YED refers to the sensitivity of the quantity demanded for a certain good to a change in real income of consumers who buy the goods, keeping all other things constant. So this will tell if a particular good represents a necessity or a luxury. So again, in the first type of elasticity, the variable that influence the demand is price. That's why it's called price elasticity of demand. In the second type, the variable that influence the demand is the income of the consumers. So if we will base the influence or the change of demand on the income of the consumers, then basically we will refer to the goods or service as being a necessity or a luxury on the part of the consumers. Okay, so how to solve for the income elasticity of demand? So we have here the formula. So if you could notice, the formula is quite the same in our price elasticity of demand. Okay, so this is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in, however, in this case, our denominator is income. In the price elasticity of demand, our denominator is demand change or percentage change in price. Okay, because the variable there being considered is the price. So in this case, our factor or variable is income. So again, to compute for income elasticity of demand, so the formula is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. Okay, so here, before we go to the rules or the examples, we will first identify or determine what normal goods and luxuries are. Okay, so here, the income elasticity of demand for a product can be the same also as, can be classified also the same as in the first type. They can be elastic or inelastic. So, however, it will be based on its category. So, whether it is an inferior good or just a normal good. So the coefficient for measuring income elasticity is, in this case, we have mentioned that's YED. So here, our rule is when YED is more than 0, so the product is income elastic. Okay. For normal goods, they have normally positive YED. So that is when the consumer's income increases, the demand for normal goods also will increase. Okay, so take note of that. Normal goods can further be broken down into normal necessities and normal luxury. Okay, so here, normal necessities have a positive but low income elasticity compared to luxurious goods. So here, the income elasticity coefficient of our YED for normal necessities is between 0 and 1. Okay, so normal necessities include What are these products? So we include some of these examples are milk, fuel, or medicines. So these are our normal necessities. So again, for normal necessities, the income elasticity coefficient is between 0 and 1. So we have a positive but low income elasticity for these types of goods. Okay, what about for luxuries? So luxuries, on the other hand, are considered to be highly income elastic. So what are the examples of luxury goods? So they include high-end electronics or jewelries. So we consider your cell phones, okay, with higher specs, and others, okay, which we may consider as high-end electronics, and of course jewelries. These um, luxury goods normally has greater value or price. Okay, so if the consumer's income increase, they may invest or purchase a high-end mobile or an HD television. So meaning, if they expect or if the consumer expect or receive an increase in their income, so basically their standard of living for some will also increase. That's why they tend to purchase high-end electronic or gadgets, or even what you call this, luxuries or luxury goods. Okay, so what about for inferior goods? So here, inferior goods have negative income elasticity. So that is, their yield is less than 0. In this case, if the consumer's income increases, they demand less of these goods. So inferior goods are actually called inferior because they usually have superior alternatives. Okay, so meaning if a consumer's income increase, then he or she might start taking a cab, for example, instead of opting for public transport. So public transport in this case is an example of an inferior good. So meaning there is an, what you call this, superior alternative. Okay, so again, as mentioned earlier, as the income of the consumer increase, their standard of living will also tend to increase. Okay. Next, so those are for income elasticity of demand. So again, there we talk about the classification of goods as normal goods. So we have normal necessities and luxury goods, and the inferior goods. So again, this or yet will depend on the type of good that the consumer is purchasing. That also depends on their level of income. Okay, so we can now to the third classification. So we have here cross elasticity of demand. So here, this is an economic concept that measures the responsiveness in the quantity demanded of one good when the price of another good changes. So this is also called as cross price elasticity of demand. Okay, so here to compute for the cross elasticity, so we have the formula that is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded for one good divided by percentage change in the price of the other good. Because in this case, we measure, okay, the quantity demanded of one good when the price of another good will change. Okay, so that's why it's called as cross elasticity of demand. Okay, so the last is we also include here the price elasticity of supply. Although our topic or our module is about demand, so we still include the supply here since we are talking about the different types of elasticity. Okay, so here, but of course in our supply, in the module, for supply and its determinants, we will also describe and discuss the elasticities under supply. But in here, we will just introduce it. Okay, so here, this measures the responsiveness to the supply of goods or services after a change in its price also. So according to the basic economic theory, the supply of a good will increase when its price will rise. Conversely, the supply of a good will decrease when the price decreases. So again, this is just the application of our law of supply and demand.